Facility Operations meeting to order for April 17th, 2024. We have a few items on our agenda today. So I think I will turn it over to Mr. Dan Young to get us started.
Sure. Would you like to do introductions first?
Yes, please.
Okay, I'll start. Dan Young, Chief Operating Officer.
Dana Hoyt, Director for Planning and Real Estate.
Mian Lee, Interim Deputy Superintendent of Business and Operations.
Julia Brum-Edwards, committee member, board member.
Herman Green, board member, community person.
Okay.
Liz Large, contracted general counsel.
Roseanne Powell, board manager, and I also just want to call your attention that we have a student signed up for public comment that can stay until 5.
Carrie Bradshaw, executive assistant.
Natasha Garcia, project manager, Office of Operations.
Hello.
Stormy Shanks, I am the new senior director in the Office of School Modernization.
Welcome.
Welcome.
Kirsten Calvin, real estate manager.
Myself, the outgoing.
I was just as confused as you right now.
I'm not confused.
Okay.
I'm good.
Okay.
Her choice.
Julie Roeder, planning and real estate.
Odell, interim chief of staff.
Terry Proctor, Communications Department.
All right, that's everyone.
All right. I'm Gary Hollins. I'm chair of the Facilities and Operations Committee. I'm a pass it to Eddie.
I'm Eddie Wong, board member, committee member.
All right. Well, let's go ahead and get it started. We got till 6 o'clock to get this going. And
All right, I'll jump in, and I know
Gary, I might have to leave a few minutes early.
okay.
And Chair Hollins, did you hear my comment that we have a student signed up for public comment who has to leave at 5?
Okay. So how many public comments do we have today?
We have 2 people signed up. The second person is not with us.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second part.
We have 2 people signed up. We have one who's the student is with us virtually right now. The other person's not here yet.
Okay. Well, let's go ahead and if the committee members don't mind, we go ahead and hear the public comments so that way the student can go on about his or her day.
I'm bringing them over now.
Okay. Oh, this is pretty cool. Hello, Marquita.
Hi.
We went to school together, everyone. Way back.
Back in the day.
Yes.
Hi.
Good evening to you all. I'm Katsiri Vera Guzman, RIVERA-GUZMAN. I use she, her pronouns. I'm a freshman at Cleveland High School. I'm a descendant of the Shoshone-Bannock tribes of Fort Hall, Idaho. I also am part Puerto Rican and Mexican. I'm here to provide my perspective as to why PPS should support a Native Student Success Center. I recently was invited to participate in a student panel with other Native students as part of the Culture and Classroom community feedback sessions. When students were asked how they felt at school, the first response that came up was, "I feel lonely," and everyone in the room agreed. I feel this way too as one of just a few Native students at Cleveland. This feeling of isolation isn't only a present issue. During our discussions, Native parents and grandparents who also attended PPS expressed the same feelings. A Student Success Center would provide a space specifically dedicated for students to get away from their feelings of loneliness and isolation at school. As a high school student who is very connected to my culture, I would love to have a space to connect with other Native high school students about my Native traditions and cultural teachings. Maybe even take a Native American Studies class from a Native teacher I've never had, and host cultural events with other affinity group leaders. A Native Student Success Center could be all these things and so much more. Portland is home to one of the largest urban Native American populations in the U.S. There are an estimated 60,000 Native Americans who call Portland home, and they represent more than 380 tribal affiliations. The diversity within our own Native community is significant. And in an urban environment, it is much more difficult for Native people to stay culturally connected, being away from our traditional homelands. The Student Success Center would provide a space for our PPS Native students to stay connected with and informed on our culture. We know that students with strong cultural connections and positive racial identity have higher self-esteem, are more likely to graduate high school, and are less likely to consume drugs and alcohol. With your support, we can build this space to center the needs of our Native students and allow them to be both culturally and academically successful. This is Native land after all, and we just want to build it. Thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. I wanted to say also that I think there's another community member who is looking to join, but she said she didn't get the virtual link to join. It was Noreen Smokey Smith, so I think she also wanted to provide public comment this evening.
I did send it. I can resend it.
Maybe resend it. I'm just kind of texting back and forth with her right now.
Okay, so what we do is
Thank you.
Oh yeah, no, thank you so much. I appreciate it. So if she comes on, then we can go ahead and hear her testimony as well. But we can. Do you know, Kara, if it's going to be like a few minutes?
I'm resending it as we speak.
Okay. We'll just wait for Kara real quick to see if we can get the person on before we move on. Oh, that is so cool. Yeah, we literally went to middle school together.
Oh, back to the Whitaker days.
Yeah, and high school. That's awesome. That's her daughter. That's so cool.
Yeah, well, maybe she has some stories.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I'm actually off the screen. Oh man. Okay. Well, Kara, if she comes on, just let us know, and then we can we'll hear her testimony when she gets on. Okay.
Okay.
All right. Dan is on you.
Okay. I know this is a jinx, but theoretically we might be actually quick today. But I said before, so they can say like a number of times, so they'll like counter the jinx. In the materials and board book is the quarterly written update from the Bond Accountability Committee and the Office of School Modernization. We transitioned probably 2 years ago away from presentations. Those are written. And they're in the board book. So if any committee members have questions, you can feel free to submit them directly to me and we can get those questions answered. The next topic is an update of the Profit Education Center relocation.
Okay. Hold on there. I do have some questions around the BAC reports. So I will just send those. I'll send those to you, but I have a few. One around the audit tracker. They have mentioned about, once again, about the equity and contracting piece. Looking at the equity and contracting piece around Benson High School. Which I believe it's a caution as far as equity, budget, schedule, and overall. And so I just wanted to make sure that I do have some questions about that, because we are going to be using the same contractor as well on the Jefferson piece. And I know one of their things was talking about equity and hiring, more minorities and minorities contractors in this Jefferson project. So I just I have questions around, based on what they have done compared to what they're saying they're going to do, and how we're going to make sure we continue to keep people accountable for that as well. So that was my comment and question around the BAC reports.
Yeah, happy. Yeah, send those over to me and we'll coordinate responses.
Is it possible when you respond to just share?
Sure. Yeah. We'll share the
Oh, absolutely.
Director Collins, I see
Yeah.
our other person has joined.
Okay.
Are you
If
ready?
the
now?
committee don't mind, we can go ahead and hear that one too.
Go ahead.
Okay. All right.
Noreen Smokey Smith. Noreen, I'm moving you over. Noreen, you may begin when you're ready.
Did she hear you? You may begin whenever you are ready, Miss Noreen Smokey Smith.
She's also muted.
She's muted.
I was just hoping that she might be muted, and if you can turn your mute, you're muted right now. I'm hoping she can hear us. Because if she can hear us, then she can hear us saying, "We're waiting for you. Unmute yourself and begin to speak." Maybe someone can text her. Yeah.
Kara, are you able to contact her, like through the chat or anything?
Well, the chat's disabled, but.
Okay.
I'm glad chat is disabled.
I don't know why. You talking about to the 4 people that's watching? Kara, are you able to contact?
Oh, there we go.
Like through the chat or anything?
Are you able to hear me?
Yes.
I'm glad chat is disabled.
I don't know why. You come up to the 4 people that's watching.
She's watching the live stream. She's watching the live stream.
We're getting a lot of feedback.
It's because she's watching the live and trying to be on at the same time.
Okay, I'll turn off the live then.
There you go.
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yeah.
we can. There you go.
Okay, I'm sorry for this. I need a secretary. Good afternoon. My name is Noreen Smokey Smith, and I'm an enrolled member of the Washoe Tribe of Nevada and California. I'm also a former director of our district's Indian education program and have been retired for 16 years. I'm currently serving as the elder member of the Title VI Indian Education Parent Committee. 2 weeks ago, I was invited to join a design team for our district's Culture in the Classroom initiative, where I learned about the Center for Black Excellence. Not only do I support this concept for our African American students, the need is just as great, if not more, for our Native American students whose academic achievement in PPS is even more dismal. Although the number of Native students is a much smaller percentage of the district student population, the achievement gap for our kids is considerable, in addition to their high dropout rate, which is about 50%. And that hasn't wavered since I began teaching in PPS 46 years ago. While the PPS General Fund supports 2 FTE in the Indian Education Program, the $300 per student from the Title VI grant provides barely enough federal dollars to fund 1 FTE plus annual operational costs. Our 511 enrolled students are spread out in nearly every school in our district, making it logistically challenging for 3 staff members to connect with and support them. The need is much greater than current resources can provide. While millions of district dollars supported other communities of color over the last decades, special programming funds for Native students in our district have been minuscule. Now, a portion of the 2020 Black bond dollars will support the continued development of the Center for Black Excellence. Our Native students deserve racial equity, which is why I and many other Portland Native community members would like 2020 bond dollars to also support the development of a Center for Excellence in Native Education. Not only would staff of this Native Center support the Title VI program in meeting culturally related academic needs of our Native students, they would collaborate with PPS administration to help fulfill our district state mandated tribal consultation obligation, as well as help provide staff development to ensure implementation of Senate Bill 13, Tribal History, Shared History in our district schools. The creation of a Native Center of Excellence will demonstrate our district's commitment to closing the achievement gap and improving outcomes for Native students in PPS. Thank you very much.
Thank you for sharing. Thank you. All right, we will turn it back over to Dan.
All right. So our next topic is an update on the PEC relocation. So in board book are two materials. There is a short update memo, and then also a summary of the PEC staff survey. Let's do a little background overview. So Resolution 6861 has two primary deliverables, which we call phase one. That is development of minimum criteria to evaluate potential new locations for all the PEC functions, and also co-development with ABT a work plan that will identify deliverables and timelines for us to identify a new headquarters and operations center. The final criteria and work plan will be presented to the board on May 7th, which will kick off phase two, which is the search and evaluation of new potential property. At the conclusion of phase two, which is roughly 10 months or 11 months from now, 12 months from the resolution, will be the latter phases, phase three plus, which includes tasks such as negotiating purchase and sale agreements with property owners, site improvements as needed of the new sites, move efforts, planning, moving, etc. And none of those efforts have timelines right now, so those are the latter phases. Work with ABT is progressing on the work plan, and also other materials that we're working on with them, such as our operating agreement. The past several weeks have been very busy. We have had interviews with roughly 45 different department leads in this building to better understand the functions of this building. And we sent out a staff survey that had over 300 respondents, which we thought was pretty great. Some takeaways from the survey. Parking is king. Free parking comes up in virtually every conversation, but it's critical that we have parking for our staff and for visitors on our future sites. Access to food in the building or nearby, proximity to multimodal transportation, access to a significant share of coworkers so people can collaborate on their work is important. And building amenities are in there, and such as important building and site layout that facilitates collaboration. We also hear things about needing natural light and the such. Some other interview takeaways that we've heard is collaboration is critical to our staff. They really feel the need to be able to meet with individuals in close proximity, and that needs to be convenient and efficient. And the size of the facility that we anticipate searching for is substantially similar to what we have now. So roughly 70,000 square feet of office space and roughly 300,000 square feet for our operations functions, which include our shops, our warehouse, nutrition service. So that is a very quick, high-level overview of where we are now. There will be an executive session later this month, and then the final materials, their presentation will be on May 7th. Materials will be out before that. So, Tana, did I miss anything
that sounds
critical?
great.
Questions?
Just to go back to the May 7th. So there's going to be a work plan we're going to approve, and I forget, I have the resolution somewhere, but we're actually approving the minimum criteria or just receiving it?
Approving the minimum criteria, receiving or the work plan.
Any other questions? comments, thoughts? All right.
I guess the only thing is, standard list, in that minimum criteria, obviously, there are, functions in this building that have, provide information about the things that they need to do their jobs. All the minimum criteria will be public and accessible for people to see, obviously, if we're gonna vote on it, correct?
Yes, I can't think of any exceptions. Yes.
And we'll be reviewing that with department heads Monday.
Thank you.
Great work.
Any other questions?
Nope, looks like it's on you now, Gary.
Okay, well, let's move to the next agenda, Dan. We roll.
Okay, the next and final agenda item is a 2024 bond planning update. About a half hour ago, I sent an email with some materials. We brought hard copies as well. And Kara or Rosanna, someone's already got them up in Board Book, I see, so appreciate that. That was super fast. Our previous 2024 bond planning updates have been pretty rich in content. We've had lots of materials, lots of pages. Tonight is a pretty quick overview. We're kind of in the middle of updating a lot of stuff, so today is a pretty high-level overview, but happy to answer any questions that you may have. But let me do a quick kind of recap. Hit on just there's 3 documents that we're providing. They're all pretty short, but I'll walk through those as well. So recap time. In January 23 was our first work session where we reviewed a sample bond options ranging from 850 million to 1.5 billion, as well as lots of data on scope of work, budgets, financing plans, etc. General takeaways from that meeting, direction to staff was that we should consider pursuing a larger bond principal amount, not a specific number, but on the larger end of the scale. Continuing to prioritize.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't say that out loud. I said 5 billion, but I didn't
5 billion.
realize my mic was still on.
That would be the larger criterion.
Waiting for the second on that.
Also continuing to pursue the high school modernization projects, allocating significant funds to address existing facility conditions, proceeding with planned technology improvements, and retaining the existing levy rate. Based on that feedback, we came back to F&O on February 28th, where we reviewed a single $1.8 billion sample bond option. At that time, the directors largely reconfirmed the previous priorities and also considered additional scopes of work such as athletics and asked questions around curriculum and technology scope. In March, we came back again where we reviewed a $2.2 billion potential bond option, so creeping up towards your target there, Gary. And we spent time specifically discussing technology scope and budgets and the curriculum scope of work as well. This option largely aligned with the prior feedback. And also in March, we had updates to athletic scope of work, the curriculum modernization cost estimates, and the program contingency percentage. So getting to today, we have the bond option is the same as it was last time. However, those numbers are going to change. We have a number of areas where we're focusing on refining the scope and updating those cost estimates. Athletics is one, curriculum is another, and physical facility improvements. So let me touch on a couple of those. So athletics at the March or February meeting, originally you presented a list of options, and we're doing a crosswalk with that with the long range facilities plan. I'll call it 90% done, but there's still some more kind of ticking and tacking we need to do between the long range facilities plan, that list, and where some of our cost estimates are. So we'll have that done pretty soon, but we just didn't have it ready for today.
Yeah, that was actually one of my questions, because I know the document that Director Brim Edwards had presented, and in partnership with in conjunction with the athletic director, was like 91 million. And then we seen, the last facility F&O meeting, it jumped up to 148 million. So I was just really kind of confused on what that jump was.
Sure, and I'll address that and talk about why we're trying to do that crosswalk, so that's very clear. So the 148 million was the estimate to do the 3 hubs that were in the long range facilities plan, plus 4 of the middle school improvements. The list that we had includes some of that work, but not all of that work, and then other work as well. And on some sites has partial improvements that are in the long range facilities plan, but some are excluded. So it's taking time to go through and understand all of those, and we're working with PIL directly, and then be able to put together an estimate for that work. Does that make sense?
It does, but so when I look at the document that was submitted back in February, for instance, between the 3 hubs that was on that list, it ended up being like 27 million. So I'm just going by the list that I know Director Edwards, and she can probably speak to this well, that I guess her and the athletic director kind of talked about. So once you say, like you said, you're going to be crosswalking some of this stuff. I just wanted to make sure that, the stuff that Director Brim Edwards and the athletic director Martha Haskins worked with, and just the difference between that 148 to the 97, because the 97 did include the athletic hubs, at least going by the paper that was presented.
Yeah, and I'll just straightforward, we have a draft of it, and then some of those questions came up, and we didn't have good answers to it, so we said we're not going to share it with the committee until we have better answers. So
Gotcha.
Good answer.
that's why it's not here today.
Gotcha.
I'll also say, while there's a focus on the athletic hubs, they're also, so just having, sat at the table since we've had several bonds there, and I think the team has done a great job on the high school modernizations. One of the things that I think we're even getting better at is just making sure when we get done, do we make sure we have parity with baseball and softball? And so really that other stand for Roosevelt, or that other piece of work for the stadium for Roosevelt. So there were some other things that I think might be considered sort of loose ends to other people that I tried to just go through high school by high school about what I've heard from community members that is sort of incomplete.
Yeah, I understood. I think that it comes out clear, I think, in the
And sometimes people go get their own estimates, which obviously we can't base our work on their own estimates. So I appreciate that crosswalk happening.
Yeah. No.
So, and I just have one question. It says Benson Track. So from my understanding, Benson Track is supposed to be happening this summer, but then I see on here is that something different?
I think I know the answer to that question. The Benson track is scheduled to happen this summer. So it doesn't need to be in the 2024 bond. We already have funding set aside for the Benson track.
Yeah, I was just going to say that we are meeting out with the arborist next week, I think, and so it may, depending on what we have to do, we make it push August-ish. So not that this is a topic, but it's a bit of a unique project in that the middle of the track still needs to remain open. The track itself isn't just a resurfacing. We actually have to take out the concrete.
Oh.
So there's pretty significant work, but we need to keep it open, and there's trees that we need to protect. So it's complicated. So basically, we're working through all of that, but that is already in play.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the middle of the track is going to remain open during the
middle of the fields.
I'm sorry. The middle of the
Yes.
field is going to remain open.
Yes.
During the construction period of
the track.
Correct.
Yes, because that's a lease agreement with Parks and Soccer Club and.
who's taking
don't
on
have control of it.
the risk from that? You got construction happening, and you got equipment, you got it's a lot of unearthing that's going to be happening because you just said you're not just repaving the track, you're taking up the track. So you know what? I'm sure that's something that you thought about.
Parks has a fun process for that,
Yes,
where it's called the NPUP process. But yeah, so it's going to have to be phased.
It's been all.
I'm gonna sit over here, Dad.
Yeah.
I'm gonna let you do what you do.
I don't know the details. The smart people are working on something like that.
One of the things.
Well, I say that Benson Track kids and the PE folks kids that go out there and run on that is surely appreciated by them taking up that concrete because it's hell running on concrete.
Oh,
and I did it for 4 years, so just want to say much appreciated.
So one thing, just since Gary brought up Benson in looking at this 28 to 30 years, is I know the city agreement with the PCU, the soccer club, does expire at some point in time. And I don't know if we need a placeholder, if we're thinking we want to do something very similar to what we did with Grant of getting a long-term lease with the city so that we actually could put like a real thing there for the Benson community. And it's just, I know like right now at this point in time, we don't have, it's not ours or anything like that, but I'm thinking, but in the next 28 to 30 years, at some point, we'll have that opportunity.
About 8 years.
So I don't know if there's like a placeholder, that time frame. I'm not really used to looking at something in a time frame 28 to 30 years, but I do know that will come due, and then at that point in time, Benson will be the last PPS school that doesn't have like literally their own field.
I don't know the answer to that outright, but it's definitely on the radar in our conversations with Parks about when that expires. And I think what you're saying is tying capital to that for that opportunity that is going to be years down the road.
8 years.
About 8 years.
8 years. Let's just say the number.
Yeah.
Because she just told us it's 8 years. So in 8 years, I think what I'm hearing is, is there any way for us to get some money, set some money out, or set something to put a marker somewhere that says in 8 years we're going to go after this hard so that we can get something that the Benson community can call home for their own track, do a long-term lease, something similar. Am I off?
Yeah, so maybe
Let's get
you
it.
cross out the word Benson Track since it sounds like it's going to be taken care of beforehand and have a placeholder longer term. And again, I don't know what the solution is, and I'm not suggesting one, but it's just given the length. If we were just going out for 4 years, it'd be like, oh, we can talk about this in 4 years, or somebody else can talk about it in 4 years. But since it's 28 to 30, it seems like it might be worth just like what is the long range facility? I'm sure it doesn't say anything, but it probably should.
No. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with that too. I think and then not just for Benson, but I mean, I know one of the things that I mentioned before was having funds in there for potential land acquisition as well. But I agree. I think, especially when we talk about athletic spaces, being able to develop the Benson I was at Benson Track, but the Benson Track over there with the football, because now they're going to be starting football. So looking at being able to develop that, can help ease some of the needs of the hubs as well, because you have, a lot of space over there as well to, for football, track, baseball, diamond, maybe up on the park area. But just having some funds in there to be able to develop that at some point.
Getting close to that $5 billion mark.
Hey, yeah, you.
So Dan, since you went to athletics, which is the second one on the list, can I go back to the deferred maintenance?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure what how these documents are going to be used, but I think there would be value in, since this is a big budget category, and I know it's a really important one for the district staff, is to maybe just a couple sentences of narrative of what that is. Because I think it becomes easy for people like, oh, we want to do this other thing. Oh, deferred maintenance, that's like nothing. But it's like, oh, it's actually seismic upgrades and, new roofs and everything else. I think it's the boiler replacements or whatever it is, to have a little bit more description in that when we, even just in our public documents, because otherwise it's kind of like, well, it's a big category for something that's generically described, but it's important.
Yeah, I think that's totally fair. The staff memos have some pretty long narrative about different deferred maintenance, but I get your point of saying as we start to sort of package this to be kind of more descriptive about what that scope of work is and the value of, I mean, really deferred maintenance is about improving overall facility condition. And that is what the impetus of those projects will be to improve facility condition.
I think when you start describing it, everybody's like, yeah, that's what we want. I mean, just all the things that we hear about. Generally, the people talk about their buildings unless they're in a new modernized building.
Yep.
And a good question on and I know the maintenance for the ongoing stuff is a general fund issue. But are we thinking about those two? Like, for instance, the new buildings that we're having, the new buildings we're building. I don't know, there's some way in the bond that we can stretch out that the maintenance costs for those new buildings. I thought, and I might be mistaken, I thought it was like 3 years out for maintenance. Is there a way we can, now that we're going for such a larger bond, is there a way we can stretch that maintenance out to say 7 to 10 years?
I don't know the exact language. That's probably a question for our bond counsel, but there's limits to bonds. Can't pay for ordinary maintenance repair. They can pay for warranties or a certain extent. I don't think those go beyond 2 years.
I don't know. I mean, the general rules, it has to be capable of being capitalized.
Yeah, but the warranty on the capital asset, I think, is 2 years. Marina's giving me a head nod for 2 years. So we've tried to push that boundary as much as we can.
So they're not like no extended warranties, like car dealerships. They no extended warranties, and
I think there's when you have it's like a maintenance warranty. The roof warranty, for example, will be for the life of the asset or whatever. Maybe it's 20 years, but a maintenance warranty can't go beyond 2 years.
Okay.
Continuing on, so you have two other documents. You have 3 documents. You have the update.
Are you moving away from this document? Are you done?
Maybe. That's my question.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Before you moved.
I think I was going to come back, but I forgot.
So I raised this at the last meeting. I would like to have a committee discussion about a Center for Major Student Excellence, and I'm noticing it's not on this list, so I'm curious about how we start the discussion. So, for example, I know the PPS Native community was asked to participate in some of the planning around the Center for Black Student Excellence, and that I'm not sure quite how I bring the best way other than just raising it in a committee meeting of having a discussion about that, or whether there is some other way in which staff to engage the PPS Native community about that concept.
Yeah, I think I know there's some meetings and some discussion happening about the center, and I think the intent is they can come back with some information. I'm not sure exactly what that is yet, but I know that there's some efforts happening there. So I apologize, I don't have that clarity on what that target is. It's not forgotten. It's just I think some of those staff conversations haven't all happened yet.
Great. So next meeting, or whenever you have an update, you'll let us know.
Yeah.
But there's also the governance. I mean, I think the committee should decide how it wants to add things. I mean, staff is bringing forward considerations, but the committee will have to engage in that discussion.
I guess I'm interested in what, instead of like doing something to the community, like how would we engage them in the discussion?
I think
recognizing that engaging people in discussion doesn't, there's a separate question about whether something gets added.
I think it's fair that we can the committee wants to have this conversation, which I think it does. We'll bring the right staff to have that conversation.
Okay. Maybe we had that at the next meeting. I did have a question though, because as we're doing these, Center for Excellence, do we keep going? Like, for instance, the Hispanic Center for Excellence or Asian Center for Excellence. as we're talking about doing these things, how far do we go, or where do we stop? In having all these Center for Excellence, right? If we're going to do Native Americans, then shouldn't Hispanic Latino have a Center for Excellence, and shouldn't the Asian Americans have a Student for Excellence, or
Pacific Islander.
So
Yeah.
the reason I raised it is for two reasons. One, if you look at our board goals, we have historically two groups that PPS has not supported their students, and that's the Black and Native students. So that was one reason. And then also just in our larger conversations about what PPS is, their engagement with AVT and the work that we're doing to repair harm that happened to the community, that if there's another group that has experienced harm because of either PPS or just Portland, the city of Portland in general, it would be the Native community here.
But wouldn't it be? And I agree with you. I think but that holds true for a lot of communities. Like, for instance, the Asian community, there was in internment camps, during the war. The Hispanic community, so I think, I'm fine with it if we do, absolutely. But if we're talking about repairing the ills of, the city or PPS, I think we have to address all those groups, because it's not just those two groups. It's been all those groups that have been hindered or harmed by PPS specifically, and by the city of Portland.
I'll say, and the achievement levels of Native students, like I say, when you look at our board goals, we've identified two groups that we know historically have not been well served by people. So thinking about ways in which we can elevate and improve and support our Native students. And that, it probably looks different than because as we didn't describe what the Center for Black Student Excellence was going to be when we put on the ballot. We said it's going to be co-created in the community, and I would imagine that would be the same process, and the outcome different.
Okay. Well, and to be clear, like, our board goals specifically list African American, Pacific Islanders, Native American, Latinos, and Asian students. When we talk about the third grade reading, fifth grade math, eighth grade readiness, it specifically talks about those specific groups. So it's not just two.
I think it's a good conversation, or you can raise that point. I just think we should have a discussion about it, because
Well, ain't that what we doing?
okay. Well, the question is, like, in what format? It would be better than more than just you and I who to be engaged in discussion. I think we should engage the Native community in the discussion.
Yeah,
and Eddie's got his hand raised.
Eddie got his hand raised.
Yeah, I want to second that. Looking forward to a discussion about the Native American, some kind of Center for Excellence. And Director Hollins, to kind of get at your question, where do we stop? I think it's easy to stop because budget. But the thing is, like, where should we start? And I feel like we need to start with the populations that have the most struggle engaging, or that we have the most struggle engaging. And historically, it has been the Black, African American, and Native American populations. And speaking from experience, I've had quite a few Native American students, and from indigenous tribes as well. And one of the very common themes is that the difficulty in engagement. And by the time they get to me, when I was the high school teacher, it was already too late for so many of them. And I think that's kind of where it is. And, you know, the other thing is that, you know, it's also a need-based thing, right? We have to look at what's needed. And one of the things, unfortunately, with, you know, PPS's staff is overwhelmingly white and not very diverse. And they have a lot of, you know, there's been a historic need in terms of this lack of, you know, who knows, cultural or just engagement with, especially our African American and Native populations. I think that they've had the most struggle with connecting to. So I think, you know, I think the conversation, if we talk about need based, right, let's tackle the highest needs first. And then, you know, I mean, ideally in the long run, we would have, you know, figure this whole thing out, and eventually we don't need any student for because the whole district is excellent, right, or is great for all types of cultures and students. But we're not there yet. So yeah, that's my 2 cents. I would also like to have that conversation, because I think it is a very big need. It is something that there's a hole that we as a district have had trouble fixing, and having this would help us fix it.
So I'm just curious. So do none of that logic that you mentioned, Director Wong, do none of that logic relates to the Latino population either? Or is or the Latino population is okay?
No, definitely not okay. But I mean, they have things going for them that you know, and the Asian population as well, that you know, the Native American population don't have going for them. For example, like there are increasing representation among staff and teachers. And again, we're not there yet. I'm not saying that there is no need, whatever. But I think one of the things that we don't want to do is going with the attitude like, oh, if we can't fix it all, we don't fix anything. I think that's why I said, like, my approach is that what I'm for is approaching it by tackling the largest needs first, right? The populations that have struggled the most. And then if budget allows, we can keep moving up the ladder. And, you know, obviously this is, you know, it's a great discussion to have, because, you know, there's a lot of societal ills that unfortunately falls to public schools people put pressure on us to try to fix, and we can't fix it all, but we can help on some things. And I think this is one of those things that we can definitely help. And I can't be there.
I agree. I agree, but I just, if we're going to talk about one group, I mean, is there a possibility that we can do two? You know, maybe we do 2 groups with the same funds. I would hate for us to be looking at one group and then disenfranchise another group, like for instance Latinos, and say, okay, well, you guys get it next time, which now would be another 30 years. Is there a way we can do 2 groups at the same time? Because just like the natives, when they seen the African American Center for Excellence, they were like, oh, this would be great for us too. Well, I'm sure at some point the Latino community would think that as well. Yeah, so I'm just saying, so can we do it? Can we do more than one if we are going to do it?
I mean, that's a great point. I would actually put forward maybe Pacific Islander. But at the same time, you know, like we do have programs, you know, for example, this is one thing, that the same solution doesn't work for every population. You know, for example, we have, the PPS has done a lot of stuff for our Latinx and Asian populations, for example, like our DLI programs, right? The point of the DLI program, or DLI programs, was so that native speakers, it improved the success rate of our native speakers. And it's been shown to have, and statistically. So we've done that, and that was a very specific thing for our Spanish-speaking population and our Mandarin-speaking populations, and Vietnamese right now as well, and Russian, because, you know, we've had, in terms of, you know, student success, we've had trouble. You know, data has shown that, you know, when you have students that have to learn English at the same time as keeping up with their peers, they have a much harder time doing that. And so when we have DLI programs like that, it addresses a need. And so this is, you know, for example, now we have the student, the Center for Black Student Excellence is addressing a need, right? We have a problem. You know, this is not unique to PPS, but you know, statewide, we have a problem with underserving our Black and African American populations. And I think this, again, if the community is coming at us and saying, hey, there may be a need for Native American Center for Excellence. Let's look at it, right? Because again, we have to approach it like the same solution doesn't fit everybody. We're all different people, different cultures, and things like that. So if some groups are asking for a DLI program, great. If some groups are asking for a center, and one of the things about, I know from, again, this is anecdotally, but one of the things that a lot of our Native American population struggle is that there's just so few of them in every school, and it's very difficult to kind of create that community that some of the other groups do have the luxury of having. And so, I think this is a potential, a great idea for looking into, in terms of, trying to create that, fix a hole that we don't have. But anyways, that's my spiel at spending all day taking care of a sick kid. So I'm a little out of it.
One thing,
right.
if I could ask Gary, and this is again not for this meeting, but at the previous meeting where I brought the athletics piece, I also brought a just sort of concept paper, and I don't know if Roseanne, if it's possible to, or Kara, grab it off the materials from that previous meeting, so and just recirculate it, so the concept gets back on the table, and then
I'm reading
I
it
know
now.
that just like one person raising it does not get it in the bond package, but I also am interested in having a structured conversation about the concept. And again, I brought forward a concept paper, and I'd like to hear from, for example, there's a Native staff advisory group. I think hearing from Native students as well.
Oh yeah, let me be clear. I'm all for this concept. Absolutely. I just worry that as we're going down this path, then other groups who have been harmed by PPS or by the city is not represented as well, because we don't have Hispanic folks come and say, hey, we want one right now too. I don't want to leave those out in happenstance. They say, hey, we want to do something like this as well. So I just want us to have that idea, or at least that notion, that other marginalized groups might find benefit in having something like this as well.
And I'm just going to go back to the conversations that I had when I suggested that we put in the ABT resolution also, because we talked about like whose ancestral lands was. When I suggested putting that in, two board members said, like, it shouldn't just be lip service. What are we actually doing for the community, so we can, have land acknowledgements at our graduations and everything else? To me, this is, potentially it could be something else, but a tangible way to take action versus just land acknowledgements.
Oh no, I agree. I think we should go further than that. I think if we're really trying to make amends to some of the ills that we've done, we should be giving some land back to the Native Americans. If we're really talking about truly our mouth, we'll put our money where our mouth is, I think giving them their land back, it'd be a bigger thing of they can figure out what they need to do for their kids on their own if we give them their land back and some resources to do what they need to do for their kids. But that's a whole nother topic. But I'm absolutely, like I said, I'm absolutely for this. I would not have a problem with this. I just want to make sure that as we're reaching out to, just like reaching out to the Native community, that has anybody reached out to the Latino or Hispanic community as well, and see their thoughts as well.
Bigger conversation.
Any other comments, thoughts?
On this document, I think Dan was ready 20 minutes ago to go to the next.
I actually, thank you for bringing me back to this
All right.
document. So I did want to hit on a couple of other items that are work in progress. One is something we want to bring forward is some sample program schedules, as we've talked about before, and what we estimate based upon cash flow, which is an estimator, but it's kind of a proxy for capacity, both internal and external. Is we estimate with the scope of work and existing scope that's already in the books that all this would take somewhere between 12 and 19 years. So all this cannot happen at once. So what that means is these projects, these scopes of work are going to have to be carefully prioritized and sequenced over, potentially almost 2 decades. So we want to bring forward some samples of what that might look like and get some feedback from this committee as well. Bond language, as we're getting tighter on what we think the overall scope of work is, we want to start drafting up some bond language and bringing that for discussion as well. And then the Bond Accountability Committee, what they do ostensibly for bond planning is take a look at cost estimating methodologies and our risk management methodologies that are in the bond package, and then basically will provide input to the committee, to the board, if they think our processes are reasonable and logical, and our risk management strategies are logical as well. So all of those things are in process. The last document we just want to provide, and happy to answer questions, is this matrix, which is the levy rate matrix. Our financial advisors, Piper Jaffray, have done a number. So what on here is all the different levy rate analyses that they've done since January. The bottom one that's in blue is the one that they did for this $2.2 billion package. There's lots of variables in here. This is not a one and done. It takes time to run different scenarios. They ran one for this, and in this particular scenario for a principal amount of $2.2 billion, that has an estimated total interest of over $2 billion. So for every dollar of revenue received, roughly 50 cents of that goes to interest in this scenario. For a total revenue need of over $4 billion. So that's getting close to your number, Gary, but not in the way I think you were thinking.
Right. Yeah,
That's definitely not the way he was thinking.
And also, it's long-term debt. 28 years is this model. I think 30 years is the cap that we can do, and allows the maximum flexibility. And in this model, it projects these what we call drops. So assume drops in the future of the levy rate to allow some capacity for future bonds. All those are pretty far out there. I don't think that would be necessary to make those decisions now. So the overall, I guess the point is the overall term and that interest is going to fluctuate a little bit. It's not going to fluctuate wildly from here, but it's not set in stone by any means, and we can run more analyses too. So if there's any questions on that, I'll make them up.
So with this one on the bottom, this F.1, this will allow us to go out for a smaller bond in between time.
It can be structured to allow for a smaller bond. It likely would be really small comparative to our other bonds. And so if it wasn't really small, what the likely scenario is next time the district goes out for a bond will likely require a levy rate increase.
So when you say really small, does that mean like we're not redoing schools, we're not modernizing this, but maybe it's a bucket of cash for the deferred maintenance, the roofs, the boilers, those types of things, more smaller projects?
Yeah, I'm probably not the best one to speculate, but that's how I think of it when I hear what Piper told me.
Yeah, I would love to know what that amount is, or estimated of that amount we could go out for if it was even though it's a smaller bond.
I
Is
think
that like
we'll
100 million, 50 million?
I think we'll invite our financial advisors back next time. As we refine more and more, there's going to be more detailed questions. So I think we can handle today's, but next time we might want the smart people back in the room.
Awesome. I'm just curious on this bond stuff, and I'm learning, so I don't know. Can these bonds be paid off earlier?
Yes. Yes.
Chair Hollins, can you say a little bit more about what you have in mind there? And are you
Yeah,
talking
so
about
like,
refinancing or?
well, all that, like, I'm looking at the interest. And I only know about real estate. So for instance, if you refinance later on, you get a lower interest rate, or you pay it off early. If things like that to save on the interest. Is that possibilities with bonds?
Yes, I guess I'll just make a general statement that it is possible. And typically the way that works is the interest rates are set at the time each series of bonds is issued, right? That the debt is issued, which would occur over multiple points in time for this bond authorization. And typically there is an option for the bonds to be refinanced, basically. And that's typical anytime you issue bonds like this. If rates were to come down as a whole, then there's a kind of a tipping point where it makes sense economically to achieve savings in future debt service that kind of outweigh the cost of bringing that transaction, of conducting the transaction in the first place. And also as you get further and further into the life of the bonds, again, typically the longer term bonds are at higher interest rates than shorter term bonds. And so that's another way you can typically get savings by, getting closer and closer to the maturity date of the bonds. So long answer to a short question, but yes, that is typical. And a lot of it just depends on the future of interest rates themselves. These numbers, I will say, would have looked really different, or quite a bit different, 2 years ago, before interest rates, crept up. And so, if those were to come back down, the numbers would look a little more favorable than what you're seeing.
Thank you.
That's it for me. Happy to answer more questions.
All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
It's like more of a curiosity, because it just came up during the local auction that because of the change in the value of downtown properties, we're actually going to be collecting less even with the same rate. Do we know what that band is of what we would have collected under the old days versus our current mix? And I know it's speculative doing it so long.
You're not looking at me, are you?
Go for it, Dana.
No, sure.
I'm looking up there.
I'm not sure. I haven't absorbed Piper's latest analysis closely enough to see if they've issued a pretty comprehensive report that has projections of property taxes and how far property taxes will go to meet debt service requirements. So I know they have the information about the reduced assessed values. I just have to, for one.
If there's some like simple way to just share, and it's not urgent, but just share it, because I'll just say the other day we had a question in the editorial board about the local option. It's sort of like your enrollment is declining, and yet you're getting more money because property values are increasing. And it's like, oh, but actually we're not. And I think that was a real surprise, and it would just be able to. The argument would be you actually need less money because you have fewer students. And I know in this case we have the same buildings, but I think we should be able to generally describe what the change in the property tax base is doing to actually what we're collecting.
Is
at a very high level, because I know it gets very speculative in the out years, but.
Is your question, is it about assumed AV growth? Is that what you're?
Is it about
what? Assumed assessed value growth over time? Like
So,
what that is?
Because for example, we're going from 109 million, I think, this year to next year, 100 million with the same rate for our local option.
Based on the property values of downtown, commercial properties, taking a dip.
I think it's not growth necessarily, it's the impact of the forecast on AV, whether it's up or down. Is that accurate?
And maybe in the near future, not like what we think 20 years from now. But I think it's just going to be a level set because you're like, why do you need to have it at the same rate if you have fewer students? Or now you have some modernized schools. And there's an element of yes, and actually our rate doesn't collect the same amount of, say we keep the rate the same, it doesn't actually collect the same amount of money. And then you have interest rates in and it has an impact.
Take a look at that.
And again, very general and not, I don't need it tomorrow. I just think we need to sort of be able to figure it into what's happening in the bigger picture. For sure before November editorial boards.
Yes.
All right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Director Wong? Director Green?
None, sir. Thank you.
Director Brim Edwards?
No, I got all mine in.
All right. I love this.
2 nights in a row.
Staff? Anything else? Calling once, calling twice. All right. Meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.